Hello and welcome back to another episode of TÄCHES Teaches. I'm Tash, and I'm mildly sunburnt, have spent the whole day drinking beer and doing cryptic crosswords, and thought that I should probably do a little bit of work. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you two things that I think are kind of cool about some of the new features in Bitwig 4, beta version. I'd just like to preface this by saying the day that Bitwig 4 was announced, I was very excited and instantly downloaded the beta, and I thought, oh, all of these new features are going to instantly go straight into my productions. And I have to say, I didn't make the video until now purely because I just didn't really find a use for them. I played around with some of the recurrence and the probability, and I thought, yeah, this is cool, but I wasn't comfortable making a video until I felt like I could share with you some things that I actually would use. So the two things I'm going to be showing you today are stuff that I've been using in my productions since, and I think they are quite exciting. I'll probably make more videos in the future on Bitwig 4 once some of the creases are ironed out in the new features and once ultimately I've learned how to use them better. But without further ado, let's jump right in and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. So the first thing I want to look at is probability used in conjunction with audio. A lot of the videos I've seen mainly deal with probability used in MIDI notes, but a lot of you may know that I am really into using samples and audio and sampling things and sampling other people's music and trying to create stuff out of that. And one really interesting use I see for this probability feature is being able to use top loops, but being able to use those top loops in a slightly more organic, evolving way. So I've got a kick and a hat here. I've got the Grammy award-winning house beat. Fuck yeah. And I'm just going to go through and try and find a couple of top loops. And I'm going to show you how I've been playing around. Oh, it's a little bit loud. Let's turn that down. I'm going to show you how I've been playing around with some of these probability-based audio modes. So, I mean, this is actually a terrible example. I'm going to find something, or should I better explain sort of what I'm looking for? I'm looking for something that isn't the same sound repeated. It's something that maybe is a 2-bar or 4-bar pattern of all sorts of interesting sounds, and particularly something which does seem to have sort of like quite nice, sharp, defined transients. But then again, it doesn't really matter. For example, let's take this loop. So if I turn this down a bit, let's listen to this in conjunction with our kick and our hat. Okay, cool. So that could easily work, you know. We could just throw that loop in and say, hey baby, we've got a nice loop going here. But what could be really interesting is to sort of split this into the relevant slices. So we could either do that by just slicing at onsets, or we could go in and we could chop them manually and say, well, I want this to be a part to that. Or, for the case of this, I'm just going to slice them actually in 16th notes. Because really what I want, if I... come on, you bastard. Oh, my laptop has got really hot because I'm sat in the sun outside. So I'm going to slice this at 16th notes. So this is just going to give us a bunch of 16th notes. If I were to press play now, this beta seems to have this irritating thing where the volume doesn't carry over when you slice in place. So I'm just going to bring the volume down here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all of the notes in here, and oh, God, my laptop is really not handling this well. Okay. I'm going to highlight all the notes, and I'm going to say, for every single one of these 16th notes, I'm going to put a 75% chance that they will trigger. So obviously what we're going to get now is that same loop, but there is a 25% chance on every given 16th note that it won't play. Let's listen to that. Okay, quite interesting. However, one thing that I find when I'm using this technique that I'm now talking about is that when I'm making this kind of music, these kind of organic, little percussive, evolving sounds, I would much rather for them to be short and tiny and feel like there's not enough of them, and then layer it with another thing that is short and tiny that feels like there's not enough of them, and eventually end up with enough of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fade in on every single one of these slices, and I can do that by highlighting all of them, and I'm just going to bring down the overall volume to -infinity, and I'm going to start just on the far right of this fade out knob, and I'm just going to slide this up until every single one of these sounds is nice and choppy, nice and tight, nice and choppy. Cool. So let's listen to that now. We're going to be getting 75% of these sounds are going to be coming through, but obviously they're not going to be it's going to be like so let's check that out now. We could probably even fade in a little bit more. Let's slide that up there. We could try maybe a, what's this, a logarithmic linear as opposed to S-curve. Let's try that. Okay, I'm really into that. I like that a lot. I think that sounds really cool. Let's bring the volume up a bit. Nice, okay, that's cool. So we're going to call this prob loop 1 lop, okay. God damn, my laptop is so hot. Loop, there we go, nice. Let's find another one, and maybe something with a little bit of a different tonal characteristic to it. Okay, let's take this hat one, actually. Nothing's really happening here, but we can do the same thing, where this time, in fact, I'm going to not slice at 16, I'm going to slice at onsets. I happen to have a bit of a love-hate relationship with the onsets detection mode in Bitwig, because a lot of the time it completely misses them. I would love to see a feature added in where we could basically scale up or down the listening level or the resolution at which it decides on what is an onset, because that's clearly an onset. Anyways, let's try this. Let's now fade them in again. So I'm going to bring this all the way down to infinity. I'm going to start fading up until we get something nice and tight. Cool. So let's check this out. Way too loud. And I'm going to actually half the speed or double the speed of this, so we're getting them as 16th notes. Super nice. And I'm also just going to hard quantize all of these now, so I'm going to highlight all of the bloody notes, and I'm going to press Command U. There we go. Nice. And now I need to refade these bastards. There we go. And let's bring some probability into it. Let's bring this up a little bit more if we can. And let's maybe say 50% of the time we're going to get some of these notes. And actually, I'm not happy with how that's detected it, so I am going to... Oh, I'm going to do that before the probability. So let's undo that and put this back to 100% on all of the notes. You're going to have to bear with me and my very overheated laptop here. Let's now bounce that in place, and let's see how it's detected those onsets. Okay, it seems to have done it a lot better this time. So I'm going to slice at onsets. Cool. And let's give it a good old fade in. So let's crank this motherfucker down and make sure that we are on loop, which we are. Now let's maybe give it, say, actually 50% seems a little bit too normcore. So I'm going to say 55% of the time we're going to get one of these little hat patterns come through. So let's check that out now. Now, already what I think is interesting about this is we have this hi-hat and kick, and that is a continuous pattern. Nothing is changing. It's going to keep going till the cows come home. But as I start to bring in these little things, what we're doing is we're building sort of a platform for randomness and organicity to happen around our rather more structured patterns. So let's keep adding loops and let's see what kind of vibes that we can create. What about this same thang loop? Let's see that. Okay, that'll do. Again, it sounds like garbage because it's a shit loop, but if we slice at onsets, and it actually seems to have done pretty well this time at detecting them. I'm now going to do the same old thing. Let's bring this down to minus infinity, fade it up. Very nice. And okay, so here's actually a cool point. So maybe I like the clap. So let's listen to this in conjunction with the rest of the loop. Maybe I want the clap to always be there. So what we can do is we can highlight all of the claps. So that's a clap, that's a clap, that will be a clap. Oh, zoom in a bit. That's a clap, that's a clap, that's a clap. That's also a clap. You guessed it. That's a clap too. And this one. So I'm going to put these all the way up to 100% chance. I swear I had done that already. What's going on here? Ah, okay, I hadn't actually set the others. So I'm going to set all of them to be 63.5%. Nice. Something quite good about that number. And I'm now going to just select the claps. So it's going to be the 0.2s and the 0.4s. Scroll forward a bit. Da-da-da-da-da. And that one, and that one, and that one. And let's bring these up to 100%. So this means that we're going to be using just parts of those loops randomly, but parts of the loop will be a continuous thing. So we're going to be getting this clap popping through at every single interval, every moment. And in fact, one thing I will do as well is I'm going to get rid of some of these these are these long hats that clearly it hasn't picked up. Well, I mean, it shouldn't have really anyway, because there was no transient to tell it. Oh god, shit. Fuck. Okay. Let's just do that. Okay, nice. Now I'm just going to do the same old thing of bring the fade in. Very nice. Okay, so now in theory the clap will always be there, but all the other sounds, there'll be a 63.5% chance that they will play, and whatever 100 minus 63.5% chance that they won't play. Let's check that out. Very nice. Not maybe the best sounds we could be using, but it's the layering of these things that start to make them very interesting. How about this one as well? So let's slice this in place, and instead of doing the fade, I'm going to do the older grain size transient preview onset thing. This was the first ever video I made on Bitwig, and I'm 100% sure that I'm using it in the totally wrong way. This preview thing is probably just so you can hear where the transients are. It's probably not designed to be left on, but it does give some rather cool effect. Let's listen to it without it and turning it on. Cool, so what that does is it basically is just giving us the transient of every sound. If I turn it off, it's the closest I've found to the transient shortening arrow to the right with a line beside it in Ableton. Doesn't always work really well. You can change it so instead of onsets it's a 16th. That could be quite cool as well. You can bring out a rhythm in something that doesn't have a 16th note pattern. But I'm going to leave it at onsets for now. But I'm going to add a bit of probability into it. So let's say for this one I want a 46.79% chance. Let's rounded it up. Ooh, there's a helicopter going over. Let's check this out in the context of our amazing beat. Very cool. Let's just add one more loop. What's this? Basic Guarana. I'm into that. Slice it up, quantize it, and then let's do the old fade in. Let's listen to it in context as is. Nice. Let's add a bit of probability to it. Let's go for 63.9%. For the hell of it, let's also just use some of that recurrence thing. I want there to be a double kick at the beginning of every 4 versions. So I'm going to go down here, I'm going to draw that in, and currently if I press play, I don't want that to happen. So in fact, I'm going to do it every 2. So I'm just going to change that to 2, which means that this note here will play every second time. And in fact, I'm going to do this here. I'm going to bring the velocity down on these notes. And I want this to happen every 2, but starting on the 2. So let's select these notes, and select that bad boy and that bad boy, and let's do the old 2 recurrence, but I'm going to turn it off the first and do it on the second. Obviously, you know, this new feature, if you're using it on something like 2 bars, you might as well just elongate it and add it in. But I don't know, I'm trying to use these new features in a way that feels you know, like it's speeding up my workflow, and I do genuinely find that. So let's check that out. I'm also going to bring the velocity down on that a bit, so let's just see. Actually, I'd like that to happen every 4, so cool. Let's also add in on the 2 and the 4, we're going to add this note in. So let's do that, and we'll do 4. And we're going to change that to the 2 and the 4. So in fact, let's do this on the 3 of the 4. So we'll do that there. Nice. Okay, cool. So now we've got this kind of nice rolling pattern. Not massively into this sound, I think. Whatever that hat is, it's just not doing it for me. So I'm going to see if I can fade a little bit more. Let's just, in fact, let's try the old transient preview onsets thing. Let's see if that tightens it up a bit. Actually, yeah, that's actually done it for me. I'm happy with that. Might be quite good to bring a bit of swing into this, so Let's enable the groove. Not massively into that kick, to be honest. Let's see if we can swap it for one that I've starred. Okay, that's cool, I'm into that. Okay, so that sort of sums up the basis of what I was saying. If you can take these rather simple loops, and if you use a small percentage-based probability for it, you can get a lot more out of a loop that's even a bar long. I'm just going to see if I can drag in from this other project file. I've already closed it. In fact, what I'm going to do, because obviously using loops is one thing, but one other quite cool little technique that you can use, if I bring this microphone in, okay, we can hear ourselves multiple times. I'm going to turn off auto monitoring, and I'm going to just record some table hits to the beat. So let's see. Okay, so we've got a bunch of sounds in there. I was recording, obviously there's a lot of wind being picked up. I was recording hitting the table and jumbling some keys and whacking one of my cider bottles. Let's listen to that as is. I'm pretty sure it's going to sound like garbage, but let's see. I'm excited for those keys. Ooh, there we go, nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just slice it on sets, and I don't really care if it's got it right, and then I'm just going to hard quantize, because I do want this to be nice and tight, and I'm going to bring this down and do that little fade bit. So in theory, if I were to press play now, we've got at least a slightly cool sounding rhythm. Let's see. Okay, I mean, it's alright. It's probably getting drowned out in the rest of these stupid sounds. Let's mute some of these guys so we get back to the original vibe. Okay, yeah, I'm into that. So what I'm going to do is the same old thing, and again, bearing in mind, you don't have to keep it to be a nice tight 8 bars. In fact, I'm going to do this as so it's sort of a very odd polycycling pattern, where instead of being 8 bars, it's 8.5 bars. So that means that even if we were to leave it with 100% probability on every one of these events, it's going to be sounding different every time, but I'm going to add into it a little bit of probability. So let's set this to 74.2%. So every single one of these will have a 74.2% chance of triggering. And for the sake of making this really stand out, I'm going to add a reverb, and I'm going to do my stock reverb sound, which is no late mix, so we're just using the early reflections. I'm going to bring that width up, and this should at least like pop it out of the mix a bit. Yeah, cool. Whatevs. So, I mean, you get the point. The next thing I want to look at is the more MIDI-based function. So everyone is aware now, if I take... I'm actually going to start with Omnisphere. I'm not even going to use one of the stock Bitwig plugins, because I want to create something on the fly that feels really quite nice. And I'm thinking maybe like a hang drum or some sort of like metallophone from the ethnic world section. So let's see what we get in here. Maybe this coffee can kalimba main. Yeah, brilliant. I'm into that. Okay, so the point of what I want to try here is basically what we can now do with the whole probability-based effect is we can pick a chord. So somebody out there in the audience, please pick a chord. Okay, yeah, you up front. C major 9. Okay, so we're going to put in a C, E, and a G. Oh. And I'm going to add the 9. Okay, so I now have a C major add 9. In fact, let's add the 7th just for the hell of it. Okay, I'm going to shift this up an octave, and let's drown this out. Okay, so if I were to press play currently, obviously what we're going to get is just the chord. Let's make it shorter. We don't need it to be 4 bars. Now what's quite cool is we can, I'm going to shift this back up again actually. What we can do is we can basically add the chord a number of times. Now I wouldn't usually do this, but I'm just going to put an octave above. So now we have the full chord twice. That doesn't sound particularly good to my ears. And in fact I'm also going to do it an octave below. This really won't sound good to my ears. It sounds like shit. But what we can now do is we can basically say that of all of these, there is a 50% chance that any of those notes will play. So what we're doing is we're just sort of allowing the possibility for all these different octaves of the same chord to play. Sometimes we may end up with a chord that is just C, 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 and C, such as the risk of probability. But a lot of the times you're going to end up with these very interesting voices that you wouldn't necessarily try yourself. And whether or not you just keep it running like that, or whether you then do the old right click and expand, which will then allow you to say, okay, well I want 8 repeats of this, cool, whatever. So now you've got your chord progression of just the same chord being played. Let's speed it up so we can jump through it quicker. Obviously you could throw like some sort of arpeggiator on there afterwards, and that allows you to... Quite cool. But what's quite nice is obviously if you pick a chord and then pick another chord, so I'm just going to exactly leave it the same way, and I know that this is a C major, I can just now move this to an F. So all I need to do is move that first C all the way up to an F. Nice. So now we've got our C major 9 and we've got our F major 9. Let's try that out. Let's turn off that arpeggiator. Let's shorten it as well, so we're getting more repeats. Might be quite good as well if we were to anchor ourselves to what we're actually listening to. I'm just going to put in a quick bass line, if you could even call it that, with what I'm going to do, but I'm just going to do the root and the fifth. So we've got a C, and then we've got a G. So let's go do... Let's just do this. To an F. Let's do that down. Okay, cool. So if I just make these into a little group, I can go through the scenes. Really beautiful. I mean, I'm sure you can see the huge amount of possibilities that you can get out of doing something like that. I just need to plug in my laptop charger because I realised I am running on pretty low juice all of a sudden. There we go. Nice. So what starts to get a bit more interesting is I'm going to just delete everything above here, and I'll do it again afterwards. But we can start to use the recurrence feature to add almost a polyrhythmic essence to this. And if I say, well, the C, I want it to drone on the C always. So I'm going to say I'll just leave it as is, which means it will play every time. On the 9th, actually, let's go in order. So the 3rd, I want to happen every 2. The 5th, I want to happen every 3. The 7th, I want to happen every 4, and then the 9th, I want to happen every 5. So let's listen to that as is now. And in fact, I'm just going to do the same thing. I've dragged this up. So now we're getting... let's get rid of the probability for a sec. Let's go all the way back to 100% and listen to what we're getting. Really beautiful, but because of the fact that some of those things are happening every 5 notes, I'd really like to get a bit more of a rhythmic feel to it rather than just a chord happening. You know, I want it to feel almost like an arpeggio. So the way that we could do that is we can just shorten the actual length of the loop. If I shorten this to half now, you'll see that we start to introduce a bit more exciting rhythm to it. really beautiful. And of course, if we shorten it even more, we'll start to get almost like a 16th note arpeggio. If I go all the way back here, you're going to see it starts to get really quite cool. Or we can try 3. And in fact, let's also now add that upper octave as well. So we just need to add another C here. And of course, all of those notes are behaving in the same way. If we wanted to, we could even go in and say, okay, well, that C is happening there, that D. We want this to actually happen on the second now. So let's make all of these things happen on the second instance of their iteration. I don't necessarily know where I'm going with this per se, but let's check that out. So let's get rid of those top notes for a sec. And if we bring this back to being actually 8th notes, if we expand it, obviously, you get this rather cool fucking pattern that emerges that, I mean, I wouldn't have come up with that on my own, so let's check it out. Let's turn that arpeggiator on. Let's loop it. Which is cool and all. Yeah, I love that. I think it's really cool. But of course what we can do is we can introduce probability into it. And in fact, I'm just going to go back and stop that from happening on the second instance. And let's just shift this all up. So we have 2 octaves. So now we still have that same pattern happening. But I'm now going to introduce, say, a 75% chance that any of these notes will trigger. And what's quite nice about this whole recurrence and probability thing is that the recurrence and the probability are sort of separated in a way, almost in a case that it's like probability comes first and then recurrence. I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but I think it's nice that it doesn't basically not take into account one pass through if the note doesn't trigger. So let's try this now. Turn off that arpeggiator. And for the hell of it, let's also introduce some of the new velocity spread. A lot of you may know that you can now press the Alt key and drag up, and then you can introduce a bit of spread, but it's a bit finicky at times, and it doesn't always work. But you can actually just do it over here. On all of these, you now have the option to open it up like where you did with the histogram, but you can just change this spread. So this, if I highlight all these notes, let's go back, and we'll go to velocity. We can go now to, that's very bizarre. Velocity spread. Okay, there we go, that's why. So now what we can do is we can introduce into it a little bit of chaos and spread there, and now all of these notes have different amounts of it. Or we could go back and just do it manually, and we'll just do that. And now all of them have the same amount of spread. But you can do that, of course, with these guys on gain and pitch and all that kind of stuff, but I don't think this works with third-party VSTs. It's got to be a Bitwig VST for that to work. Or a Bitwig inbuilt plugin. So now, of course, if I were to shorten this, we're going to be getting all sorts of short, quick notes, but the velocities between them will be changing. Maybe shorten it even more. And now let's do that with our other chord. So all we need to do is just shift that C up to an F. And we'll call it now an F. F major 9, and let's have a quick listen through. Let's double the length of the loop, because that sounds a bit stupid currently. Really nice. I suppose the takeaway from this is, you can now come up with a chord progression, but then you can layer that chord progression with the same chord progression a bunch of octaves up and below and introduce a bit of chance into it, whether or not on certain playthroughs you're going to get sort of octaves of those notes. And of course you could keep maybe the root, the third and the fifth of the main chord, or the actual main chord to be 100%, but then you're getting sort of 60% of the time octaves or sevenths or ninths and stuff being introduced into it, which I just think is wonderful because it just allows me to stay excited while I'm listening to things. But yeah, I'm going to be doing some more videos on Bitwig 4 moving forward. I think it's a really great start in another one of those classic Bitwig moves of going like, cool, we're going to do this now. And I'm very excited to see what changes are made to the subsequent Bitwig betas coming out in the next months, weeks, whatever, how long it takes until the final version is out. But I hope this has been some sort of inspiration into some of the things that you can do with the new features. Well chaps, that's sadly all we have time for today, but I do hope that this video has been useful. If you enjoyed it, then please remember to like, comment, subscribe, smash that notifications button too, if you'd like to keep up to date with all of my future videos. You could also take your support a step further by becoming a patron on Patreon too. In the meantime, happy... God damn it, I can never remember the day. Is it a Tuesday? Happy Tuesday and happy creating. I'm off back to drink more warm Coors Light and finish off some cryptic crosswords. Adieu, friends.